Why America is Great, the Culture of Volunteerism. Good evening, everyone. Tonight I want to talk about something that distinguishes American society in profound ways, something that often goes unnoticed in discussions about what makes this nation remarkable. I'm talking about volunteerism, the tradition of ordinary citizens stepping forward to serve their communities without expecting payment or recognition. This isn't just a feel-good story or a minor cultural footnote. Volunteerism represents a fundamental pillar of American civic life, one that has shaped the country's character since its founding and continues to drive social progress today. When we think about what makes America great, we often point to its constitution, its economic power, or its technological innovation. But beneath these visible achievements lies something more fundamental: millions of Americans who choose to give their time, energy, and skills to help others. According to the most recent comprehensive data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and AmeriCorps, approximately 28.3% of Americans volunteered through or for an organization between September 2022 and September 2023, contributing an estimated 4.99 billion hours of service. To put that in economic terms, the independent sector values volunteer time at approximately $34.79 per hour in 2024, meaning American volunteers contributed roughly $167 billion worth of service to their communities annually. These aren't just statistics. Behind each number is a person who chose to spend their limited free time helping others. A retired teacher tutoring struggling students, a businessman serving meals at a homeless shelter, a teenager cleaning up a local park, a nurse providing free health screenings at a community center. Together, these individual acts of service form a massive, decentralized social support system that touches nearly every aspect of American life. The roots of American volunteerism run deep, extending back to the nation's colonial period. Alexis de Tocqueville, the French political thinker who toured America in the 1830s, was struck by Americans' propensity to form voluntary associations. In his masterwork, Democracy in America, he wrote that Americans of all ages, conditions, and dispositions constantly form associations. They have not only commercial and manufacturing companies, but associations of 1,000 other kinds: religious, moral, serious, futile, general or restricted, enormous or diminutive. Tocqueville observed that where in France or England you might find a government official or nobleman leading a public initiative, in America you would find a voluntary association of citizens. This tradition wasn't accidental. It emerged from necessity and philosophy in equal measure. Early American settlements lacked the strong central governments and established institutions that Europeans relied upon. When a barn burned down, neighbors gathered to rebuild it. When a community needed a school, parents and local citizens constructed one together. When disaster struck, communities organized their own relief efforts. This culture of mutual aid became woven into the American social fabric. But volunteerism was also philosophical, rooted in Enlightenment ideas about civic virtue and republican government. The founders believed that democracy required active, engaged citizens who took responsibility for their communities. They understood that a free society couldn't survive if people only pursued private interests and ignored public welfare. Benjamin Franklin exemplified this ideal. He founded America's first volunteer fire company, first public library, first public hospital, and numerous other civic institutions, all based on voluntary cooperation rather than government mandate. Today, American volunteerism manifests in countless ways. The most common form involves religious organizations. According to recent surveys, about 31% of volunteers serve through religious institutions, often through food banks, homeless services, youth programs, and international relief efforts. These faith-based volunteers form the backbone of America's social safety net, providing services that would otherwise fall to government or go unmet entirely. Educational institutions represent another major beneficiary of volunteer service. Approximately 26% of volunteers work with educational or youth services organizations. Parents volunteer in classrooms, helping teachers manage larger class sizes and provide individual attention to students. They coach youth sports teams, lead scout troops, organize school fundraisers, and chaperone field trips. Retired professionals mentor students, helping them navigate academic challenges and career decisions. Without these volunteers, many educational programs simply couldn't exist. The scale of youth mentoring alone demonstrates volunteerism's impact. Organizations like Big Brothers Big Sisters of America serve hundreds of thousands of young people annually, matching them with adult mentors who provide guidance, support, and positive role models. Research consistently shows that mentored youth achieve better educational outcomes, avoid risky behaviors more successfully, and develop stronger social skills than their non-mentored peers. One study found that young people with mentors are 55% more likely to enroll in college and 78% more likely to volunteer regularly themselves, creating a virtuous cycle of civic engagement. Healthcare represents another arena where volunteers make tremendous contributions. Hospitals and health clinics depend on volunteers who staff information desks, transport patients, provide companionship to lonely patients, and assist with administrative tasks. According to the American Hospital Association, hospitals engage approximately 1 million volunteers who contribute nearly $800 million worth of services annually. During the COVID-19 pandemic, these numbers swelled as retired healthcare professionals and other volunteers stepped forward to help overwhelmed medical facilities. Environmental conservation provides yet another example of volunteerism's reach. The National Park Service reports that over 300,000 volunteers contribute approximately 6 million hours annually to maintaining trails, leading educational programs, protecting wildlife, and preserving historical sites. State and local parks depend even more heavily on volunteer labor. Environmental organizations like the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, and countless local groups mobilize volunteers for habitat restoration, wildlife monitoring, and advocacy efforts. These volunteers enable conservation work that government agencies lack the resources to accomplish alone. Disaster relief showcases American volunteerism at its most dramatic. When hurricanes, floods, wildfires, or tornadoes strike, volunteers mobilize rapidly. The American Red Cross, perhaps America's most iconic volunteer organization, provides roughly 90% of its workforce through volunteers. These volunteers staff emergency shelters, distribute food and supplies, provide mental health support, and help families navigate recovery. After Hurricane Katrina in 2005, volunteers from across the nation descended on the Gulf Coast, gutting flooded homes, distributing supplies, and helping displaced families. Similar responses followed Hurricane Sandy, the California wildfires, Hurricane Harvey, and countless other disasters. Beyond these organized efforts, Americans engage in countless informal volunteer activities. Neighbors help elderly residents with yard work and home repairs. Community members organize neighborhood watch programs that reduce crime. Parents form carpools that reduce traffic and strengthen community bonds. People donate blood, knowing they'll likely never meet the recipient. Citizens serve on local planning boards, school committees, and conservation commissions, donating thousands of hours to municipal governance. The demographic patterns of volunteerism reveal interesting insights about American civic life. Women volunteer at slightly higher rates than men, 30.7% compared to 25.4% in recent surveys. People aged 35 to 44 show the highest volunteer rates, likely reflecting parents engaging with their children's schools and activities. Individuals with higher educational attainment volunteer more frequently, with 39% of college graduates volunteering, compared to 22% of those with some college education, and only 12% of those with high school education or less. Geographically, volunteerism rates vary significantly. Utah consistently reports the nation's highest volunteer rate, with approximately 50% of residents volunteering annually, likely reflecting the strong emphasis on service within Mormon culture. Other states with high volunteer rates include Minnesota, Oregon, Alaska, and Kansas. States with lower rates tend to be in the South and Southwest, though even in these regions, millions of citizens contribute volunteer service. Corporate volunteerism has emerged as a significant trend in recent decades. Many companies now encourage or require employees to volunteer. recognizing that community engagement builds employee morale, develops leadership skills, and enhances corporate reputation. Some companies provide paid time off specifically for volunteering. Others organize company-wide service days where employees work together on community projects. According to the Committee Encouraging Corporate Philanthropy, more than 90% of major companies report having employee volunteer programs. And corporate volunteer hours have increased substantially over the past 2 decades. Skills-based volunteering represents a particularly valuable form of service. Rather than general labor, skills-based volunteers provide professional expertise that non-profits couldn't otherwise afford. Lawyers offer pro bono legal services to low-income clients. Accountants help small non-profits manage their finances. Marketing professionals assist organizations with communication strategies. IT specialists help non-profits implement technology solutions. The value of these specialized services far exceeds the $34.79 per hour average for volunteer time, often representing hundreds of dollars per hour in market value. Virtual volunteerism has expanded dramatically with improved internet access and collaboration tools. Volunteers now tutor students remotely, provide online counseling, translate documents, manage social media accounts for non-profits, and assist with data analysis, all from their homes. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this trend, as traditional in-person volunteering became difficult or impossible. Many organizations discovered that virtual volunteers could effectively contribute to their missions, expanding the volunteer pool to include people with mobility limitations, caregiving responsibilities, or geographic constraints. International volunteerism allows Americans to serve beyond national borders. Peace Corps volunteers have served in over 140 countries since the program's founding in 1961, with more than 240,000 Americans participating over the decades. Religious organizations send missionaries and service volunteers worldwide. Organizations like Habitat for Humanity International, Doctors Without Borders, and countless others mobilize American volunteers for international service. While some criticize certain forms of international volunteerism as ineffective or even harmful, others argue that cross-cultural service builds understanding and addresses genuine needs when done thoughtfully. The motivations driving volunteerism are complex and varied. Many volunteers cite personal fulfillment and the desire to make a difference as primary motivations. Religious faith motivates many others, who see service as a spiritual obligation or expression of their values. Some volunteers are motivated by professional development, hoping to gain skills or experience relevant to their careers. Others volunteer to meet people and build social connections, especially after retirement or relocation. Some are motivated by personal experience with a particular issue, like disease survivors supporting medical research or former addicts helping others in recovery. Research on volunteerism's benefits reveals advantages for volunteers themselves, not just those they serve. Studies consistently show that volunteers report higher life satisfaction and better mental health than non-volunteers. Volunteering appears to reduce depression and anxiety while increasing sense of purpose and social connection. Physical health benefits also emerge, with some research suggesting that volunteers have lower mortality rates and better cardiovascular health than non-volunteers, possibly because volunteering increases physical activity and reduces stress. For young people, volunteering provides particularly important developmental benefits. Adolescent volunteers develop stronger civic identities and are more likely to remain engaged citizens throughout their lives. They gain practical skills, explore career interests, and build resumes. Many colleges and universities value volunteer experience in admissions decisions, recognizing that service develops character and leadership. Some high schools now require community service for graduation, though this requirement-based volunteering generates debate about whether mandated service undermines the voluntary spirit that makes service meaningful. Despite volunteerism's many strengths, the American volunteer sector faces significant challenges. Volunteer rates have declined from historical peaks. In the early 2000s, roughly 29% of Americans volunteered annually. After dropping during the 2008 financial crisis, rates recovered somewhat but have trended downward in recent years. The COVID-19 pandemic particularly impacted volunteering, as many programs suspended operations and people faced competing demands. While rates have partially recovered, they remain below pre-pandemic levels. Time constraints represent the most commonly cited barrier to volunteering. Americans work longer hours than citizens of most developed nations, leaving less time for community engagement. Economic pressures force many families to prioritize paid work over unpaid service. Commute times have increased, further squeezing discretionary time. While technology promises to save time, many people feel busier than ever, struggling to balance work, family, and personal responsibilities. Demographic shifts also challenge traditional volunteerism. Younger generations volunteer at lower rates than older Americans, though they may engage in different forms of civic participation, like online activism or social entrepreneurship. Geographic mobility has weakened community ties, as people frequently relocate for work and lack deep roots in their communities. These trends worry civic leaders who recognize that healthy democracy depends on engaged citizens. Many non-profit organizations struggle to recruit, train, and retain volunteers effectively. Managing volunteers requires significant staff time and expertise. Organizations must screen volunteers, provide appropriate training, create meaningful assignments, offer supervision and support, and recognize contributions. Small non-profits with limited staff capacity often find volunteer management overwhelming, even as they desperately need volunteer help. High volunteer turnover compounds the problem as organizations invest in training volunteers who then leave after brief service. Questions about volunteer effectiveness and impact also merit consideration. Not all volunteer efforts produce intended results. Poorly designed programs can waste volunteer time and fail to help intended beneficiaries. Sometimes, volunteers lack necessary skills or training for their assignments. In some cases, volunteers may even create problems, like international volunteers taking jobs from local workers or building substandard structures that later require repair. The relationship between volunteerism and government responsibility generates ongoing debate. Some argue that robust volunteerism allows government to abdicate its responsibilities, essentially subsidizing inadequate public services with unpaid labor. If volunteers staff food banks, does that reduce pressure on government to address poverty? If volunteers tutor struggling students, does that excuse inadequate school funding? Critics worry that celebrating volunteerism obscures structural problems requiring political solutions. Others counter that volunteerism and government services complement rather than substitute for each other. They note that volunteers provide personal attention, flexibility, and community connection that government services often lack. Volunteers experiment with innovative approaches that government agencies later adopt. The presence of engaged volunteers may actually strengthen political pressure for adequate public services by keeping community needs visible and building constituencies that advocate for solutions. The future of American volunteerism will likely evolve in response to social and technological changes. Virtual volunteering will probably continue expanding, potentially attracting people who can't participate in traditional face-to-face volunteering. Skills-based volunteering may grow as non-profits recognize the value of professional expertise, and professionals seek meaningful ways to contribute. Corporate volunteerism might become more strategic and impact-focused rather than simply counting volunteer hours. Younger generations may reshape volunteerism around their values and preferences. Millennials and Generation Z show strong interest in social issues but prefer flexible, episodic volunteering over long-term commitments. They value immediate impact and authentic experiences over traditional institutional volunteering. They integrate service with social media, sharing their experiences and encouraging others to participate. Organizations that adapt to these preferences by offering flexible opportunities and demonstrating clear impact may successfully engage younger volunteers. Technology creates both opportunities and challenges for volunteerism. Online platforms now connect volunteers with opportunities more efficiently than ever before. Apps help organizations manage volunteers, track hours, and communicate with supporters. Crowdfunding enables people to support causes financially, even if they can't volunteer time. Social media spreads awareness of community needs and mobilizes rapid responses. However, technology also competes for attention and may contribute to declining face-to-face engagement. Climate change will likely drive increased demand for volunteer environmental efforts. As extreme weather events become more frequent, disaster relief volunteering will grow more important. Conservation and restoration work will require massive volunteer mobilization to protect threatened ecosystems. Climate adaptation projects in vulnerable communities will need volunteer support. Demographic aging presents both challenges and opportunities. As baby boomers retire, they may volunteer in unprecedented numbers, bringing decades of professional experience to the non-profit sector. However, an aging population also increases demand for volunteer services, particularly in healthcare and elder support. The balance between retired volunteers and elderly service recipients will significantly impact America's social support systems. In conclusion, volunteerism represents a distinctive and valuable aspect of American society. It reflects core American values of community, mutual aid, and civic responsibility. It enables countless programs and services that government and markets don't adequately provide. It strengthens democracy by building social capital and engaging citizens in their communities. It benefits volunteers themselves through personal growth, social connection, and life satisfaction. American volunteerism isn't perfect. Rates could be higher, particularly among certain demographic groups. Volunteer programs could be more effective and better managed. The relationship between volunteerism and adequate public services requires ongoing attention. But even with these limitations, American volunteerism accomplishes remarkable things every single day. When we ask what makes America great, we should remember those millions of volunteers who coach youth sports, staff crisis hotlines, restore habitats, tutor students, care for shelter animals, build homes, distribute food, fight fires, provide medical care, and perform countless other acts of service. Their collective efforts, given freely without expectation of payment, represent America at its best. Ordinary citizens taking responsibility for their communities and working together to solve problems. The culture of volunteerism reminds us that America's strength does not reside only in Washington or Wall Street or Silicon Valley. It resides in neighborhoods and communities across the nation, wherever people choose to serve something larger than themselves. That tradition of service, passed down through generations and adapted to changing times, represents a profound source of national strength and a powerful answer to the question of what makes America great. Thank you.